Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain.
Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this afternoon, our special guest is Dr. Mark Goulston, who has written many books, but the one we're going to discuss is Just Listen. Why hope when you can heal? Why cope when you can heal? Thank you. Put it in a little more this way. Yeah, a little more now to that way. You got it. Very good. So Dr. Mark is going to discuss several things. So whip out your pencils, take out your piece of paper. If you can't find anything, Joe, cut your wrist and use the blood. I mean, people paint with the damn stuff. You might as well use it for other things. Okay, so good morning, Dr. Mark. How are you doing?
Lillian, you made my day. I did a TEDx talk called What Made You Smile Today, and we were starting a global movement. You can go to TEDx, What Made You Smile Today, and when COVID gets a little less tense, we're going to go back to it. But you made me smile today. And I think your secret is you make other people smile, because here's one of Lillian's secret sauces. She doesn't know it. You can trust Lillian to never hurt you. Yeah. She'll entertain, she'll delight, but you can trust her to never hurt you. And that is special because nobody trusts anyone anymore.
That's true. And my job is to make you look good, make sure the audience identifies with you, and then goes and buy your book immediately before the rest of their brain kicks in. And that's pretty much how people look at it. Everything is done with your stomach. I mean, if you talk to my son, who's been having stomach issues ever since he got married, I can honestly say that some of it is real stomach problems, but I think the rest of it is his responsibility and his worries for his family. And he doesn't take them very lightly, which I think is great, but I don't think it's good for his stomach.
So how old is your son?
He's 48.
And when did he get married?
2000, 3 days before 9/11.
And does he have kids?
Yeah, 3 kids. He has identical twins that are 14, and he has a little boy at 7.
Okay, so here's a tip to give your son, because I don't like him having a knot in his stomach. And if you're listening in, here's a tip. If you're all cooped up with your family, you're getting on each other's nerves, what I suggest to you is at the end of every day, you go around the family and you ask each person, what was the thing that most upset you today? Because a lot of times when we try and put positivity, which we need, on top of pain, it's like putting lipstick on a pain. And so you ask everybody, what is the thing that most upset you? And then there's something that I call the HADA exercise, HADA. And then you say what upset you and attach the word you felt most. Hurt, angry, disappointed, afraid. And they pick a word, angry or afraid. Then when they say that, you say, what was that about? What made you afraid? What made you angry? Because what happens is when you give people a word to attach to how they're feeling, and then they express it, and you listen to it without trying to fix it, they calm down.
It dissipates.
And they what?
It dissipates.
It dissipates. In fact, we started a pilot program. I do programs to help burnout and healthcare workers, firefighters, first responders, because they're going through a war, all of them. And we actually started one with physicians yesterday, and it went better than our wildest dreams. And if you're listening in, you can do this. You can do this with your groups. And what we simply did, and here's how you do it. I'll just give away our secret. You know, they were a little bit nervous. They were smiling like this at the beginning. It was a Zoom call. And we basically said, these were doctors, and we basically said, introduce yourself by saying your name, where you live right now. So you come up with everything they have in common, where you live right now, what kind of practice you have. Are you in practice individually? Are you in a hospital? Are you retired? Did you transition? What was the reason that you became a doctor? Go way back. What made you become a doctor? And then when did it start to shift into stress? And it's a stressful position, all these service providers in healthcare, veterans. And when was the point when the stress didn't go away and it started to be something that was pushing at you? And it was called a burnout group. And then we say, what does burnout mean? And what made you think that you had it? And I'll tell you, Lillian, it hit me in the chest. Now, I'm retired. I write books and I go, speak around the world. I spoke in Moscow last year with a Nobel Prize winner named Daniel Kahneman. He wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. And my book, Just Listen, behind me is about how do you cause people to feel felt, not just understood, but felt. And then when they got into what their definitions of burnout, I got emotional. It's a good thing they couldn't see me because I was at a distance. And they said, when you're afraid to see patients because you have nothing to give them from inside yourself. When you check boxes and inside you feel this moral injury, this is not why I became a doctor. And a number of them said the same thing. They said, I knew I was burnt out when I was so trying to make it through each day and the 25 patients I needed to see that I didn't have the luxury of caring.
When my husband was dying, my doctor kept on coming back and saying, I can save him. And I said, for what? For him to go through this all over again? I said, no, let him die in peace. And he says, that's what I do. I save lives. And he was very unhappy that I would not allow him to save my husband again. And I think that's the biggest number one thing that doctors truly believe. They're here to save lives. And when they're reduced to a point where they can no longer save them, or what they're doing in California, where they make a determination who's going to live and who's going to die, that's when they feel they're most powerless. And that's when they find themselves burned out because they're incapable of helping those that they swore an oath to save.
You're so right. We've been studying burnout, and 3 elements that we discovered that draw people to become doctors. And what happens is when they start to get squelched, they start to burn out, is they're drawn to it because there's a belief they'll have autonomy initially. I'll be seeing patients. Yeah, we'll be keeping records, but I'm not there to keep records. I have to, but I'm there to help patients, one patient at a time. They can develop a mastery of skills, and they often have an interest in science, and they're very curious about that. And they have this incredible purpose, and their purpose in life is to save lives and to alleviate pain. And then what happens is their autonomy is being taken away because they can no longer survive in their practices. And then they're scooped up by big hospitals where people are on top of them to see more and more patients per day. Yes, I think the electronic record keeping is really helpful. I like seeing my chart. I like seeing the results of my visit. I think there's a lot of improvement, but having to enter all that data in, takes you away from really being able to have a conversation with your patient because you're too busy entering data. And so they feel stressed by that. Their sense of mastery, what's happening is as things become more and more specialized, they get more and more focused on their specialty area, and they still cooperate in the service of patients, but their sense of mastery is often a feeling of, boy, this is something that the patient's suffering from, and I don't know what to do, so they refer out, and then their sense of purpose. Something that I've heard that really is painful is a number of them, especially since they're struggling in their 60s, they've made an okay living. Yeah, compared to the rest of the world, they've made an okay living. But a number of them have said, and they say, and we enable them to speak from their heart. A number of them have said, I think I've been on an idealistic fool's errand.
Yeah. And they get that from society, and they get it from our work culture. And the more they interact with the people with whom they need to take care of, the more they get angry because they really have less and less that they can do for these patients. So it's a bad cycle.
It's interesting you bring that up because I like to come up with acronyms, so people can remember them. And so one of the things we talked about in the burnout group is I said, how many of you are experiencing FAT? And I said, no, it's not about your diet. FAT stands for fear, anger, trapped. Fear, anger, trapped. And the fear is, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. You have a lot of anger, but one of the things that physicians and especially nurses have trouble with is really admitting how angry they are. I mean, it's you're a caregiver, and being angry is, and it's certainly not anything that you take out on your patients, but you may feel it towards the patients who are manipulating you to get more drugs and et cetera, or the ones who, because they couldn't get those opiates out of you, give you a terrible Yelp review. And healthcare workers have a lot of trouble with being angry, and then what happens is they feel trapped. And so as they began to share those things, especially the anger that they felt a little bit ashamed of, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm not supposed to be angry, I'm supposed to be caring. They felt such relief. I mean, we've been getting emails today that, and the people who aren't, we hoped it went okay, but a number of them have said, you are really onto something. We felt so relieved.
Well, we do not really give much respect to the healthcare industry. Yes, it's true. Doctors or surgeons make a lot of money. Well, I'm dating one now, and this particular surgeon, which is an orthopedic surgeon, spends 10 plus hours every day with his patients. Folks, that's half a day. And then you have to wonder if he had a family before he met me, or he's raising a son. I happen to know he does have a son. I was a single parent. I know how difficult that is to work long hours and then have to come home and take care of your child and make sure you meet their needs.
It's interesting you bring that up, Lillian, because I have 3 grown children, and we are blessed and fortunate that they live in the same city. And we're furthermore blessed, I don't get any credit for this, is they all get along, have each other's backs. And I now have a 2-year-old grandson and a 6-month-old granddaughter, and all these cliches about being a grandparent are true. And I'll tell you, I'm discovering being present with my grandchildren in ways I weren't, because I was a busy doctor, 6 days a week. The nickname of my kids for me was hi kids, bye kids, love you kids. Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is. And I think my son used to say, I have my mom for 48 hours, Saturday and Sunday. So I have to plan for every minute to make sure nothing is wasted. Mm-hmm. And this is a young kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, who's telling his friends, I don't see much of my mom, but for the time she's with me, it's just awesome. So I look forward to the weekends. And you don't plan life like that, but it happens like that. I have a friend who's a doctor in Boston, and she was supposed to go home, but they kept her because she was a good doctor. She lived in a hotel for something like 7, 8 months. And she said she dreaded going to work after a while because she really couldn't face going in and drawing the cloth over the people's faces, watching them die, and then be stacked on those refrigerated cars, she said it reminded her of the Holocaust.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because in this book, Why Cope When You Can Heal, we talk what we talk about is something called surgical empathy, and surgical empathy is an approach that I developed as a suicide prevention, boots on the ground psychiatrist, and for 25 years, none of my patients died by suicide, and I was really fortunate, Lillian, because after I trained, about a week before I finished training as a psychiatrist, a fellowship I was going to go in got canceled. So I shrugged my shoulder and I said, well, I'll just go out. And one of my early mentors was probably one of the top 3 pioneers in the study of suicide prevention, a fellow named Dr. Ed Schneidman. He co-founded the Suicide Prevention Centers in Washington, Los Angeles, and the American Association of Suicidology, and he would refer me all these suicidal patients. And I was really fortunate because since I didn't work for an institution, as I was with those patients, I learned to listen into their eyes, not just look into their eyes, listen into their eyes, and their eyes were screaming out at me, you're checking boxes and I'm running out of time. And many of them were multiple attempters. So I had the choice to check the boxes, to protect myself, but it was a barrier between them and me, or just keep listening into their eyes and take it wherever it wanted to take me. And Dr. Schneidman, he had this great approach with people that I carried forward. And you can do this with the people in your family or people you're worried about. What he would say, and that your tone has to be that you want to hear. You can't just be checking boxes. What he would say is, what hurts? Where does it hurt? How much does it hurt at its worst? How alone do you feel when it's hurting like that? Take me to the last time you felt that. And of course, you wait for them to answer. You don't just.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And here's what I discovered when I would do that with people is when they would, and they look at you like, this is strange. You're supposed to be checking boxes. But as I said, they were screaming out at me with their eyes, I'm running out of time and you're checking boxes. And I was in a position where, I could throw away the boxes. Yes, I'd fit in the questions. Do you think you might be depressed? Do you think you might be anxious? But I wasn't putting them into a category. They felt like a person, and I was surgically going into the dark night of the soul. And here's what happens: is when they tell you the final question. When I said, "Take me there," when they would say, if it was a teenager, young adult, and of course I'd lead them there with the other questions. And I might even prompt it. I'd say, people like you, the there is 2:30 in the morning, maybe 3. And so they'll bring up a time. We'd say, okay, it was 2 nights ago, 2:30. Yeah, what happened at 2:30 2 nights ago? I was walking around my room. I couldn't get back to sleep. Then what happened? I just couldn't take it. I didn't know whether to put my fist through the wall, my head through the wall. And then I'd empathize. I go, wow, keep talking. Because obviously they didn't do either. And I said, then what happened? Well, I kept wandering around, looking for my parents' outdated sleeping medicine. I couldn't find it. And then I said, what time was that? They said, well, that was about 5. And I said, then what happened? And they said, I really thought I was going to just go out of my mind. And then the sun rose. So I felt a little bit better. But I can tell you, Lillian, as they're sharing it so vividly that I could see it, they re-experienced it, but they weren't alone. And I could weave in there, at its worst, how much did that hurt? when you got angry, how angry did you get? When you felt like putting your fist through the wall, how upset were you? And as they begin to express it, they begin to cry because they're feeling less alone there. And to me, that crying from the dark night of the soul in the hopelessness they feel is like the pus of hopelessness. And when you go in there and you help them feel felt, and my book, Just Listen, is about how do you cause people to feel felt, they start to cry with relief. And so when I coach parents how to do this or counselors how to do this, I could say, no, you're not making them cry, you're letting them cry.
And you're allowing them to cry in terms of healing, not as they're being punished, not as if they're ashamed, not as if they're doing it in anger. And that's what our society always seems to miss out on, is that when you're seeing the screaming eyes, they're showing you their tattered soul, and they want to make it whole for them to move forward.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was going to bring this up, but can I share a backstory?
Certainly.
Because people will say, where'd you learn this in training? I think one of my greatest personal accomplishments, other than the family and, we've been married many years, is I dropped out of medical school twice and finished. And I think I had untreated depression. And the first time I dropped out, I went and worked in blue-collar jobs, which I still miss because they were so simple. Go to work, come home, watch TV. It was so simple. And my mind kind of came back. And then I went back to med school. And then after 3 months, it started to leave me again. And so I met with the head of the school, who's about fundraising. The dean of the school met with me. Don't really remember the meeting. And then I get a call from the dean of students, who's about students. And he called me and he said, Mark, you better come in here. I got a letter from the dean of the school. And Lillian, I think I was at a low point because I had, at my age, it's not unusual, especially it's not unusual for males, that my whole worth was what I could do. And I think I was unable to do. So my whole worth was pretty worthless. So I go in there and he says, read this letter. And the letter was from the dean of the school. And it said, I've met with Mr. Goulston. I wasn't a doctor yet. We talked about an alternate profession. I'm advising the promotions committee that he be asked to withdraw. So I was passing everything, so they couldn't kick me up. And then I said to Dean McNary, Bill McNary, the dean of students, I said, what does this mean? And he said, you've been kicked out. And I was at a low point, and I remember when he said that, it's as if I had a gunshot wound to the gut. And I know what that feels like because I had a perforated colon about 15 years ago. I almost died from it. I went, oh.
Yeah, the pain is pretty fierce.
Yeah, and then what happened is I thought I was bleeding from my eyes. So this is not a religious resurrection thing.
Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
And so I'm looking at my fingers like this because I think I'm bleeding and they're tears. And imagine hearing this when you believe you're worth nothing because you can't do anything.
Yeah, now who was the fool there?
That's right. But I got to tell you what he told me because I paid it, because I think what helped me be successful as a suicide interventionist was I just paid forward what he did next. So I'm there all raw. And he said, Mark, you didn't screw up because you passed everything, but you are screwed up. But if you get unscrewed up, I think the school would be glad they gave you a second chance. So suddenly I'm crying. I mean, he's pummeling me with compassion. And then he couldn't leave well enough alone. And he said, even if you don't get unscrewed up, even if you don't become a doctor, even if you don't do anything the rest of your life, I'd be proud to know you because you have a streak of goodness in you that we should grade in medical school, but we don't get around to it. And you have no idea how much the world needs that goodness. And you're not going to know how much they need that goodness till you're 35. but you have to make it till you're 35. And then he said, you deserve to be on this planet, and you're going to let me help you. Lillian, I'm telling you, if he had said, if I can help you, give me a call. I think I may have.
Here's my card. I'm free between 2 and 6. Yeah.
If he had said that, I think I would have gone back to the apartment I was living in, and I don't think I would be here today. But he said, you're going to let me help you. So he arranged an appeal, and he took on the whole medical school and stood up for me and said, we're giving him a second chance. And there was something about, and this is what I recreated, I believe, with my suicidal patients. When he saw goodness in me, he saw value in me, he saw a future for me, and he went to bat for me against the establishment. So all of that together clicked something in me, and then I paid it forward for 30 years.
I can understand that. I remember a long time ago, I guess I was 22. No, let's see, I'd been when I was 20. So I was 23 or 24. And I had a couple of 6-packs because I was down in Texas, and that's what you did. You drank beer, a lot of it. And I remember drinking 2 or 3 cans and looking and thinking, well, I could just go all the way and die from alcohol poisoning. And then I thought about how hard I fought to make it through high school and how hard I fought to get that money to go to college. And then I have a child that's I'm responsible for. And I just kind of put all the beer out in the porch knowing it would be gone real, real fast. And I went on with my life. But I think that not everyone has that internal, discipline to really sort of, what I say, slap yourself back into reality type thing. And I have found that when I really hurt, I go and look in the mirror and I look beyond the reflection in the mirror. And I ask myself, okay, do we move forward or we give up? Now, remember, girl, we've been at it for a long time. And once you're gone, you're gone. You can't come back. So be really careful what you wish for.
Let me ask you, Lillian.
Yes.
If you didn't have a child, do you think it could have gone the other way?
It could have, yeah. But girls back in the 50s and 60s were the way they used to train squires to become knights in the Middle Ages. We were trained to become mothers. And we were taught that life is precious. And for those few ladies who had children, it was your job to make sure that you gave them everything you had plus an extra 10%. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I told my son, I said, I'm a little bit ashamed of myself. I used you as an excuse, but I also got strength from you because I knew I had to learn how to do this stuff. But I used you as a shield for many years. He says, well, you're not doing that anymore. If you get any more outspoken, we'll be thrown in jail, Mom. So what's your son's first name? Ben.
Ben. So you're going to give him this quote. I collect quotes. And this one came from a doctor named Milton Greenblatt. He was, I think, the head of the LA mental health county mental health thing. It's one of my favorite quotes, and you're going to tell this to him. You could say, I heard this crazy quote, and then you're going to ask him where he thinks you are. First, we are children to our parents. Then we are parents to our children. Then we are parents to our parents. Then we are children to our children.
Yes. As you grow older. Absolutely. Absolutely. I told him, I said, I have plans to live to 100. Whatever, Mom. And my grandson's real excited. He said, oh, boy, you're going to see me get married. You're going to see me as a man. And oh, boy. He was really stoked. But my son, all he said was whatever. And I said, don't worry, Penn. I am not going to lean on you if I don't have to. It's okay. I understand it. I mean, I was brought up to take care of my parents. It was not expected. It was demanded. I said, but I'm not going to put that demand on you because quite frankly, I don't want you to have to take care of me. That's not your job.
You know, Lillian, I have this real hang up. And my hang up is, and I think a lot of healthcare providers have this. I probably would have had it even if I wasn't a doctor. I can't stand being a burden to anyone.
Exactly.
I even told my wife, I said, I've got the Tempur-Pedic pillow picked out so that when it looks like I'm going to be a burden, that's the one I'm going to put over my head.
Well, I told my son, this is how I look at it. So I said, this is how we can do it. You can let me walk into the forest and let me die in peace and quiet. Or I want a New Orleans band with all the trimmings, professional mourners, and everything when I die. Total shock. He says, how can you treat this like that? And I said, but I almost died twice. There's nothing really left here to bother me. I mean, I remember talking to my doctor and said, is there something wrong with me? I said, I think the pandemic is tragic. It reminds me of the flu epidemic and the bubonic plague. I said, but I'm not scared. And he said, that's because you already have experienced life and you know. And he says, everybody else, he's a geriatric doctor. And he says, I find that most of my patients, to them, is just one more thing that they take instead. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people here at this place where I live, they're survivors of Auschwitz. They're survivors of World War II. They ate tulips when they were kids. Many of them hid in. So to this pandemic, on a scale to 1 to 1, it's relative. And therefore, they're not afraid. And therefore, I am not afraid. And my son, who's, like I said, 48, is like, Mom, people are dying. I said, yes, people are dying. That's how the earth prunes itself.
You know, I feel the same way. I mean, you know, the only thing I'm concerned about is, you know, I want to make sure that I have stuff in order so that if I die or when I die, it's not really a, here's an interesting quote. One of my mentors, Dr. Schneidman, he was a suicide specialist. And he had a mentor named Henry A. Murray, who was this Harvard Brahmin who actually invented something called the TAT test, which is now a historic psychological thing where, and the test was you'd see pictures and you would talk about what they reminded you of. And Dr. Schneidman used to say that Dr. Murray used to say, here is a definition of a perfect death. He said, a perfect death is dying so as to be as little a pain in the rear to your family as possible.
I like that. And yet that's true. I mean, I think one of the biggest things with this pandemic has shown a large crack in the fabric of the family where people are afraid to talk about death. Therefore, they haven't made their final wishes known. They don't have a living will. They don't have their own estate in order. And yet my husband and I did that, I think, when we were in our 40s, 30s, because it was important for us to plan for the end because we both know sooner or later we're going to end up in the ground anyway. So we might as well not us eat dirt, but the dirt eat us. And I find, too, that the generation in which my son is in and all the subsequent generations, they are afraid of the word death. They are absolutely petrified by it. They won't discuss it. They don't discuss it with their children. They avoid it. And the problem is, folks, you're born and you die. That is our life cycle. And somewhere in between, you get your own personality.
You know, I wonder how much of it, I agree with you. They're afraid of death, but and my grown children, it would be a very awkward thing. But I think, you know, one of the things they're really afraid of is if their mom or I die, especially their mom, because, you know, she's been, you know, she gets the lion's share of credit of being focused on the details. And I think part of what it is even though, you know, if you have a decent family, even though kids may push back and they, you know, can be very snobby about the way they treat us, we represent this center of stability in them. And the thought that that would be taken away, many of them feel that they would, cave in, that they would lose their bearings. And I'm here to say, if you're a child, an adult child, and you feel that way, everyone feels that way, but nearly everyone gets through it. And you do get over it. I heard an amazing quote that tears are the vehicle that God gives us when someone is gone from our life, and the tears transport them to our heart where they live forever.
And it's true. And I'll tell you why, folks. When my husband passed a year and a half ago, my grandson was 6, and he went hysterical when his grandfather died. Okay? And he had trouble sleeping and everything else. His behavior didn't change all that much, but he was off. So I gave him a shirt that his grandfather used to wear. And I said, this is his summer shirt. When you need a flannel shirt, let me know. I have plenty of his flannel shirts. I said, when you feel sad and start crying, put the shirt on and hug it around you. And it will make you feel better. And Ben kind of looked at me and I said, hey, it's cheaper than a shrink. So, but it did the trick. And whenever Leo, who's the young man in question, feels blue and he's still mourning his grandfather a year and a half later, he puts the shirt on and he says, I can still smell Grandpa's aftershave. And I said, well, Old Spice is hard to eradicate. So, but it makes him happy and it gives him a feeling that his grandfather is right there. On the other hand, his dad, I know he's mourning his dad, his father, but he'll look at me and he says, don't you go and die. I said, I have no plans of doing that for a while. He says, I mean it. And I think you're right. I know I couldn't understand this then, but I sort of understand it now. When my parents died, my brother said to me, I'm an orphan. I said, you're not an orphan. You're an adult with no parent. People die. Get over it. Deal with it. And he just gave me this look. And I'm thinking to myself, orphan? Really? At 50 what? So I think it's a whole psychological play here that kids don't really, they have a Peter Pan outlook on the fact that parents have a set role within their lives, and that as an adult, for whatever the reason, they're even more attached with that invisible line, that invisible emotional thread, than they are when they're younger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you just triggered something. I want to run it by you because I love our conversation and how we're brainstorming. So I've never thought this before. I wonder if what happens and why adult children, Gen Xers, have this fear of their parents dying is because a lot of Gen X, Y, and Gen Z, they run away from hurt and fear into activity. They just run towards it. And that's why they're so frenetic and smiling. Oh, life is great. Oh, wonderful. And I'm not taking that away. And I think it's good to have an exciting life. But I think, what I suggest to Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z is I'll ask a question. How do you tell the difference between whether you're running away from something into activity or you're expressing who you are in the activity? And it's a good question to contemplate. And I think many of them are saying that, well, mom, dad, if you die, it's going to be tough to run away from how much that hurts and how afraid I'll be. And my MO has been to run away from the hurt and fear forever. So I don't know how I'm going to handle it. And again, if you're listening in, and if any of this is true, you will handle it.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I think it also runs true with, after my husband passed, I was talking to my doctor because we have that kind of connection. And he told me, he said, something happens to my wife, I wouldn't be able to continue. And I was shocked. I was thinking, why is that? Are you so identified with her that to live by yourself, meaning spiritually or in faith or however you want to put it, is so much of baggage for you that she is your emotional support inside of you, that without her physical presence, you'll die. And certainly history has pointed that out to be true. And I'm thinking, that's so sad that you're so bound to somebody else that if something happens to that person, that determines whether you live or die.
Well, I'll tell you, Lillian, because you're a woman and I'm a man, but I can understand that. I mean, I truly hope that I die before my wife. And part of that is because a lot of men live and their identity is based on activity. And I used to do house calls to dying patients. So I wasn't just a suicide specialist, but I would do house calls to dying patients. And a number of them, the men, I would try to help them make peace with their lives because a number of them felt that they blew it, even though they were very successful. I remember I was seeing one person, he was just this beloved figure in the world. Everybody loved this person, but he had multiple marriages and whatnot. And, you know, and kids were a little bit messed up and stuff like that. And at the end, I said to him, and people liked that I was sort of a straight shooter. And I said to him, you know, you look awful. You look awful. And I don't think it's because you're dying, because you've been dying as long as I've known you. What's going on? And no one would talk to him because he was this big icon. But he liked that I was just direct because everyone was just so afraid to say anything. And he looked at me and he said, I don't think I've ever done anything important in life. I said, what? You have a hospital named after you. You created something that has thousands of jobs. You're beloved by so many fans. And then he looked at me, and he was really well known for his wry sense of humor. And he looked at me, and he probably lost 30 pounds by then. And he looked at me and he said, don't con a con man, especially when he's dying. I've got all the love that money can buy, and that's all it is. And I'm not close to anyone. Everybody thinks they're close to me, but I'm really not close to anyone. And so maybe, just maybe, I blew it because everything I thought was important is unimportant. And everything I thought was unimportant is important. And I've kind of run out of time and I've kind of run out of luck. I mean, you know, you hear that kind of stuff, Lillian, it's a pretty big lesson about life.
I tell people this, and I especially tell my grandchildren, because they're all three of them been told by their mother that they're the total package. And I said, one of the things about being me is that my parents didn't have any expectations for me to be successful in the world. They just prayed I would make it through college and not get pregnant before I graduated. That's all they wanted. And guess what? I surpassed them all. And you know why I'm so successful? Because nobody made demands on me and expected me to be a superstar. And here I am, a superstar, and nobody expected me to be here. So they couldn't take and pile up their expectations for me to feel the weight or disappointment because I didn't live up to their demands and expectations. And that's what you should be striving for, not the total package of brains, beauty, and whatever, having a good body or being a cheerleader. That's not what's important in the wide world. I said, nobody's going to care a rat's ass about it, but they will care of how you're going to conduct yourself with what the lessons you have learned to get you to where you are. So don't let anybody make demands and expectations on you because you'll always fail. The only person you want to make expectations and demands are from yourself.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to give your listeners and you this exercise that people find helpful. Imagine, and this doesn't apply to you, but it does apply to a lot of your listeners. Imagine your personality as a circle, and in the circle are the parts of your personality that are trying to prove show, hide, or please. The parts of your personality that are trying to prove something, show something, hide something, or please someone. And then what I suggest to people is go on a long walk with your mask on and imagine eliminating all those parts of your personality and what's left. And a number of people will say, nothing's left. All I am is someone trying to prove, show, hide, or please. And people sometimes get nervous. And I say, well, when you do that, you don't belong to yourself. You are leased out to the world. And if you do this and just allow those things to go away, some people will discover a calling that has been calling out to them for who they are and the life they were meant to live, but they couldn't hear it because they were so busy proving, hiding, showing, or pleasing.
Yeah. And lucky me, I didn't have any of that.
I know.
To have to do. And folks, I got to tell you, you're not doing your children any good, seriously, by telling them, I see you as a future president of the United States. That's nice, but that's not them. That's you inserting yourself in them.
Here is some advice that I give to parents to give their kids, especially in COVID. And there's something that I talk about called assertive humility. And this works well in business and families. And it's like baring your neck, but you're not weak. And so you say to your kids, I need your help with something. But you have to say it in the right way. I need your help with something. And they're going to say, what? My role as your parent, as your mom or your dad, is that when you reach age 18, you're able to go into the world excited instead of bored, passionate instead of blah, able to take rejection instead of being overly thin-skinned, able to focus instead of being scattered, able to follow through instead of not being able to follow through. And part of my role is to do everything I can and your mom or dad can to make sure that that's who you are at age 18. And if we don't do that, I will have failed as your dad or your mom. And some of those things are not going to be comfortable conversations. And they're not going to be ones that either of us like having, but we need to have them. And I need your help because I do think the world of who you are and how you can become. But that's what I need you to be at age 18.
It's called tough love. I told my son, if you wind up working in McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, you're not disappointing me. You're selling yourself short. And you're taking a job where somebody else, that's all they can ever live to hope to get to support their family.
You just said something. Here's another. I hope it's okay that I'm throwing these tips out. And I hope.
Absolutely. Please do.
So something else that I think is a great thing to say to your kids when they act up, when they make a bad decision, you say, do you think I'm disappointed in you? And the kids will say, yes. You could say, no. I'm not disappointed in you. I'm disappointed for you. I love you, so I'm not disappointed in you. I'm disappointed for you because if you do those things or make those kind of decisions, life is not going to treat you that well. Life is not going to put up with it. And you might get angry or whatever. So when you do those things, I'm disappointed for you because if you don't learn from them, life is going to be harder. And one of the most eloquent things I ever heard, I heard from a religious friend of mine. And when his kids act up, and he has good kids, they knew they were in trouble, so he didn't need to really shame them. And what he would say to them is, what you just did is not who I believe you to be or who I think you believe yourself to be. And I thought, what a eloquent way to, because the kid knows they screwed up, but you're treating them in a way that, instead of them being worried, what's the punishment? What you're doing is you're helping them to feel productive shame. I think shame can be productive because it can cause you to want to be a better person.
Absolutely. I mean, I told my son, I said, I've given you all the tools, my knowledge, experience, wisdom to help you on your journey. However, like me, if you feel that doesn't quite help you, you are free to reinvent yourself all over again and take the bits and pieces you believe that will be helpful to you to move forward with your life. And one final thought, Ben. I'll always love you, no matter what. Even if you go out and kill somebody, I'll still love you. I may not like what you did. I certainly would not approve, but I'll always love you and I'll always be there for you. And in knowing this, you have to be the recipient of your own love to make yourself stronger and a better and wiser person as well. He turned out pretty good from a single parent. I mean, my ex-brother told me that my son at the age of 9 would join a gang, and by the time he was 12, he would be dead. That was my ex-brother's assessment of my parenting skills.
I know this is too intimate for someone like you, Lillian, but you're Ben's hero. And that's an awkward conversation, but it's something
I've never thought of it that way, but I suspect you're right.
Yeah, you're his hero because you're like a Timex watch. You take a licking and you keep on ticking.
Oh yeah. I don't know how else to do it, and I don't know how to tell people how else they should do it. And you're not looking at somebody who always had 100% confidence and this and that. I barely made it through high school because I wasn't high school material. I just sort of fell in through the cracks. But I think what it is, and folks don't laugh, I have this little inner voice. I've had it since I was a child. My inner voice's name is Father Thomas. Thomas was a doubter, but the Lord still loved him. And I call my little inner voice Father Thomas. And Father Thomas has had many a conversation with me about letting me know whether I'm doing the right or wrong thing. So if you don't have an inner voice, I suggest you develop one because it will keep you humble and in tune to what you really, truly should be doing with your life. And on that note,
yep. On that note, to be continued at another time.
To be continued, absolutely. We're going to wrap up today's session with Dr. Mark Goulston. Hold up your book, Mark. Go out and buy the book. We all know why cope when you can heal. The pandemic is ripping you apart. Admit it, and then do something about it. People, there used to be a saying, a coward dies 1,000 deaths. A hero only one. And if you have to figure that out, go look it up on Google. It will explain it to you. We want to thank Dr. Mark for coming on and discussing some deep things that need to be said. You always get the truth around here, whether you want to hear it or not. You can hear this all over again at youtube.com, PWR Talk, PWR Network. And you can hear it on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, of course, and YouTube, and also on the website. And before you go away and stray, I just had to get this in. It's from Anatole France, 1894. Ignorance is the necessary condition of life itself. If we knew everything, we could not endure existence for a single hour. Thank you all very much for listening. Please stay tuned, stay safe, keep wearing those masks, distance yourself. You'll be curious to know that with the mask, the flu is not as bad this year. Think about that. Thank you all very much for listening. Please join us again. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You can listen to this program all over again by going over to https:// passionateworld.com. pwrnetworkllc.com. You can also hear it on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, AMFM247.com every Tuesday evening between 8 and 9 p.m. YouTube, Facebook, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and all the other podcast directories one can find on the internet.